in the beginning there was darkness and void, and God said, let there be, like whatever, is not what the scripture says. Because it turns out words are important. Words are important because words are what we use to transfer ideas from one person's understanding to another person's understanding. It's also how we record our ideas. We put them into words and we write down the words, and that becomes the record of what happened. Now, in a lot of cases, we can do pictures, or we can do other ways of recording what it is that we have in mind. But for communication, transferring an idea from one mind to another mind, words is important. And so we need to choose them carefully. The new saying at Anton, the affiliated New Thought Network, for the whole organization is mean what you say and say what you mean. And that seems so simple. It seems so simple to mean what you say and say what you mean. But the specificity sometimes gets in there, and it's really important. Here's an example. This is not something that I specifically heard, but it's the sort of thing that I hear a lot. It's something where Ellen and Sandy were talking to Mary, and she said her daughter had to go to the hospital. I actually wrote that down. Ellen and Sandy were talking to Mary, and she said her daughter had to go to the hospital. And so I know that there's something going on there, but I do not know who said her daughter had to go to the hospital, because there's 3 women in there. They could all be the her. So I don't know who said it, I don't know whose daughter it was, and I don't know, based on how many daughters there are, which daughter it was. Ellen and Sandy were talking to Mary, and she said her daughter had to go to the hospital. And Ellen said her eldest daughter had to go to the hospital. Now that's some specificity. That's actually transferring an idea. And you could say, wow, that's really interesting, Reverend Bill. Or you could say, who cares, Reverend Bill? Just ask. You can just ask for clarification, and it'll come along. Sometimes we talk about the 4 agreements in Don Miguel Ruiz, and I love the 4 agreements because it is so simple. The first agreement is be impeccable with your word, and not just be accurate or clear or definite with your word. Be impeccable with your word. Make sure that your word is exactly what you mean. Say what you mean and mean what you say. That's being impeccable with your word. And when we do that, the idea that we're transferring from our mind into somebody else's mind is the message that we want to have go through. Because the third agreement is don't make assumptions. And if I heard somebody say, Ellen and Sandy were talking to Mary and she said her daughter had to go to the hospital, I could make all sorts of assumptions about, oh, that sick child. She's the one who's going to the hospital. And that may or may not be true. Or I could think that it's going to be one person's child instead of the other, and then I can go and turn the next portion of my life into a Blake Edwards movie where it's based on a misunderstanding and it just gets more and more and more confusing. So when we hear something and it's not clear, don't make assumptions. Invite clarity. And when we're saying something, be impeccable with your word. Sometimes we describe the way that Amazon works. Is you can go onto Amazon.com and search for anything, and they have a huge inventory and list of various things that you can buy. And there's a process where you click the buttons and make the payments, and the shipment shows up, sometimes remarkably quickly. If we were to go onto the Amazon site and there was a button that said, send me something nice, that's let there be whatever. Okay? Amazon has a lot of stuff, and somebody thinks all of it is nice, whether it's nice to have or nice to sell. It's all on there for a reason. But when we say, send me something nice, or when we say, let there be whatever, we pretty much need to be okay with whatever shows up. And I've been running a teen group for a bunch of years. There was that remarkable lack of specificity with the willingness to say, yeah, whatever. And on the one hand, that's okay if whatever is going to be okay. When we are opening ourselves up to coincidence and mystery and just inviting the things to fit together harmoniously for us, then that can be a let there be whatever. And I know that the whatever is good and uplifting and wonderful and powerful for me. But when I phrase it that way, that's not whatever. That's whatever is going to be good or uplifting or pleasant or harmonious for me or for everybody who's involved. When we just let it be whatever, we're giving away our power. Because we have the power to choose. We have the power to set an intention and use our words to describe and define that intention, and then use that intention to create the next new experience that we're having in our life. So today is the first day of standard time. We went off of daylight savings time, all of us except Linda, at 2 o'clock in the morning. And there's a huge debate going on in our country about daylight saving time. And by the way, it is daylight saving time, not savings. It's savings time makes it seem like a bank account. Daylight savings time, or daylight saving time, does not save daylight. It does not save daylight. Okay, we do not have the ability to determine how much daylight there is going to be. There is going to be daylight from whenever sunrise happens to be at our location until whenever sunset happens to be at our location. What daylight saving time does is reschedules it. It changes the time rather than the daylight. And there is a movement afoot in our country, once again, to make daylight saving time be permanent year-round. Because everybody says they don't, not everybody. There are people, let me be specific and impeccable with my word. There are people who don't like the time change because it throws their body clock off. And there are people who don't like the disruption of having to change and readjust. And there are people who don't like this and that and the other thing. And it was all done for agriculture to begin with, so why bother? Well, it turns out that in the summertime, the sun comes up in Philadelphia, and this is on the summer solstice, at 5:32 in the morning, and it sets at 8:32 at night. That's 15 hours of daylight. So, and that's with daylight saving time on. Without daylight saving time, the sun would come up at 4:32 in the morning and set at 7:32. Well, that's like around the 4th of July, so that would make the fireworks at 8 rather than 9, and the long summer evenings would not be as long as they normally are. And really, the sun's going to come up at 4:30 in the morning? Well, who needs that? Who needs that? So there was this great idea. Let's shift the clocks so that we can have the sun early, it doesn't come up so early in the morning, and we get that extra time in the evening. Let's just do that. And we could leave that in place for the winter time. And there are people who want to be able to do that. There's a lawn sign, some neighbors around the corner from me, that they don't like playing sports in the dark. So we should have daylight saving time year-round. Because what happens is in the wintertime, on the winter solstice, the sun comes up at 7:18, and it goes down at 4:37. Now that's early. That's dark. That's unpleasant. So if we leave the daylight saving time in place, then the sun stays up until 5:37. But it doesn't come up until 8:15. So everything that happens is going to be in the dark in the morning. We're not saving anything. We're rescheduling it. Oh, and by the way, agriculture? Yes. The reason that agriculture is involved in this is not because the farmers are going to get up an hour earlier or an hour later based on what the clock says. The farmers are getting up with the sun. And they're doing what they're doing early, and they're going to work as late as they have to because you make hay while the sun shines, and the farmers all understand that. However, the cafe where they get their coffee in the morning, they're going to show up an hour earlier. So everybody who's supporting the agricultural business needs to start an hour earlier. So by shifting the clocks, we can just make it more convenient for everybody. And for the schools, the students, the athletes who don't want to do sports in the dark, just start school an hour earlier. You don't have to change that for your school. Instead of having school start at 7:30 in the morning, start it at 6:30 in the morning and see how popular an idea that is. So we're not changing the sunshine. Yeah, if you'd like to have more sunshine, then move to the tropics. In Hawaii, there is no daylight saving time, and the sun comes up at 6 a.m. every day, and the sun sets every day at 6 p.m., and that's always what it is. There is the same in the tropics, between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. There's the same amount of daylight every day. There are ways to make this happen. And trying to take dominion over something by changing the words is not necessarily going to be helpful. There's another, concept about, let there be whatever. So there is this notion of global warming, that our planet is adding to carbon in the atmosphere, and it's making the planet warmer, and that's sea level rise, and that's not the sort of thing that's going to be sustainable. And there are people who say there's no such thing as global warming. And there are other people who say, of course there is such a thing as global warming. And they can have an argument and a discussion about that until they get into the specifics of the words. Because if you ask anybody, and that doesn't matter which side of the conversation they're on, do you believe that we are taking more resource out of the planet than is being replaced on a yearly basis or on a regular basis? And everybody says yes. Everybody says yes to that. So the discussion is, whose fault is it? Who's going to have to change something? When is it going to turn into a problem? But everybody agrees with that, to the point where there's something that I actually found out about called Earth Overshoot Day. Anybody heard about Earth Overshoot Day? It's actually a thing. Earth Overshoot Day is the date in the year when we use up all of the resource that's going to be generated for the year. So ideally, Earth Overshoot Day should be on December 31st. This year it was on July 28th. We're 74% over the resources that we should be using, because it's not, and that's energy, and it's carbon, and it's food, and it's all of it. So we're using up the planet faster than we can, and you search for Earth Overshoot Day. There's people who are they're tracking this. So let there be whatever. Well, okay, whatever includes July 28th this year. So when we're having a conversation, when we're coming to a new understanding, let's bring in the information, the insight, the knowledge. Let's be impeccable with our understanding about what's going on, because that way we can get some clarity about what it is that we're doing. We get to not make assumptions. Oh, we can do this forever. Oh, this is not going to be a problem for me. Oh, this is whatever it happens to be. And there are things that some people say that even though they repeat them and repeat them and repeat them, they're still not true. And there is a tendency that we have when we hear something over and over and over again to say, well, there's got to be something to it. Okay, and my favorite example is the election was stolen. Okay, don't take my word for it. Okay, there's 60-something legal cases. The election was not stolen. Was it perfect? No, there's no such thing as having a perfect election. There were some things that needed some tweaking and adjusting, and we keep on making it better. But if we keep on saying something that's not true, then we keep on calling something into question and then have to think more about it. Or if we're going to put ourselves into a let there be whatever, somebody's saying this, somebody's saying that, whatever, we're just going to go along with it. And don't do that, because, as I mentioned, that's like ordering something from Amazon and just letting them send you something nice. That's giving away our power. And we don't want to do that. We want to claim our power, whether it's for something that we enjoy, or if it's for something that is important to us, or that we care about, or to support other people in what they care about. So there's lots of different ways that shows up in our life. There was a conversation that we were having on the daily meditation a couple of weeks ago, and one of the people on the meditation is dealing with a health challenge, and referred to the health challenge in the possessive, like my illness. And the suggestion was, don't claim ownership of the illness. The illness is something that's very real, and it's right there, and it's something that needs to be dealt with. But when we're claiming it as our own, then we're embodying it, and it's much more difficult to move past it. So the metaphor that we came up with instead was that this person and the illness were riding on the bus together, and it's sitting in the next seat. And so it's right there. It's right there. But there was always the possibility, well, I could just get off the bus, get on a different bus. Or it could get off the bus, and I'm free to continue along, and it doesn't have to be part of my experience continually. And it's a really subtle, possibly insignificant shift, but by putting our attention to what it is that we want to be experiencing, we let go of the other stuff and invite in the good. So that is the looping around of let there be whatever. Yes, let there be something specific. Be impeccable with your word and invite in something spectacular into your life. because you deserve it. Because you're wonderful. So it is.